Good day and welcome to today's Conversation podcast. Today we are privileged to host a Lusaka renowned lawyer, Celestine Mukandila, and we find out who Celestine is and his usual public commentary about public issues. Celestine, welcome to today's conversation.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, and thank you very much for having me here.
We usually listen to you or watch you speak on radio or on TV, commenting on public matters and public affairs, and people may not understand who Celestine Mukandila is. Just walk us through. Who is Celestine?
Well, Celestine Mukandila is a good governance activist. I am a lawyer by profession. I am also a businessman. And of course, I'm one who is from Matero. But of course, growing up, I've always known to say you should always sit and stand for something in life. So having considered and seeing how things have been moving in the country, I've always told myself to say one day I should be a voice of reckoning, a voice that should be able to speak to the governance of this country. And of course, that has been my drive from the time I've been a student in student leadership as far back as...
In fact, tell us about your early life. School, you know, you're saying you grew up in Matero. Just tell us that, walk us through up to the journey where you are today.
Oh yeah, so I did my primary school at Chingwele Primary School in Matero. And then I went to do my higher primary school, which is grade 8 and 9 at Kasamba Basic. That was still in Matero. Then I went to Nyenyezi Institute. That's where I did my grade 12. And of course, from there, that's when I went to the National Institute of Public Administration, NIPA. At NIPA, of course, that's where I went to do my diploma in law. I started first with a diploma in law. In fact, I started with a certificate in law at NIPA. Then I went on to do my diploma in law at NIPA. Then whilst at NIPA, I was privileged to have been in the student union leadership as vice president to the current Lumezi one, to Munir Zulu. Munir Zulu was actually my president.
Okay,
wonderful. I was his vice president. Yes, so from there I proceeded into doing my LLB with Lutebem University. And thereafter, of course, I went on to doing my Ziale. Yeah, so that's been my educational background. And of course, in terms of business, I'm also a businessman to trading a lot and mining business. So apart from that, just general trading also. So I think that is me.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thanks. We've known that you are interested, like you're saying, you're a governance expert, and you've been raising certain issues. What are the issues that concern you with this government? We heard your voice on police and police brutality. We heard your voice on the sale of KCM. We've heard your voice recently on the sale of Mopani. Speak to those issues.
Well, I think for me, I am more concerned with the adherence to the rule of law, the adherence to the Constitution of the Republic, you know, Zambia is a constitutional democracy. And by virtue whereof we have a constitution that has to be respected by all of us. And the president we have today is one that is elected on the basis of this constitution that we have. And therefore, if I am going to see anything being done in a way that abrogates the provisions of the constitution, I think it is within my right and my duty as one who's sworn in to protect and defend the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia, to ensure that we speak to those issues. And of course, I do so requesting institutions, for example, such as the Law Association of Zambia, to take up the mantle, to ensure that they follow up these matters. Institutions of governance, such as the Human Rights Commission, the Attorney General, to ensure that they look at these issues. So it was saddening, for example, when we heard the Inspector General of Police making a statement that was flying in the teeth of a constitutional abrogation on the rights of citizens, you know, where a statement was made indicating that no public rallies will be held by opposition political players. That in itself was extremely unconstitutional, and I had to speak to it. I had to cite provisions of the law, such as Article 20, 21 of the Constitution, which guarantees the protection of the human rights, such as the right to assemble and the right to association. So these statements that would be made by a person in authority, such as the Inspector General of Police, have to be looked at with the lenses of protection of the Constitution. So for me, I feel any act that is done that abrogates the provisions of the Constitution, we should speak to it. In an event where we speak to these acts and no corrective measures are done by the people in authority or by the government, as the case may be, then and only then can we even decide to say, okay, fine, we're taking the matter to court, because it is within my right as a person who knows to say we need to ensure that we guard our democracy, to take these matters before court, to challenge the statements that are made, and to just understand the constitutionality of such statements. And of course, looking at the issue to do with KCM, you see, when decisions are made, for me, I've always been a Pan-Africanist. And I believe that resources that we have in Zambia are enough. They are enough to be able to raise a country that will be a superpower, you know. We've got so much resources in this country. And I don't think our minds should and can be sold for a song, you know. I'll give an example. In 2020 to 2021, Zambia decided to approve the economic recovery plan. Now, in that economic recovery plan, I noticed a very good initiative, which was the procurement of gold by the Bank of Zambia through ZCCM, IH, and Zambia Gold. Now, the truth of the matter is, if as a country we had continued with the procurement of gold after the elections of 2021, by now the currency would not have been as weak as it is, which is the Zambian kwacha. And that is the truth of the matter. Big and large economies in the world are those that have got huge reserves of gold in their coffers. Imagine, and when you look at this is true economics now. When you look at it as a matter of fact, if we had continued to procure that, I can tell you that the rhetoric statement that was made by President Hakainde to say at 10 hours, when I'm sworn in at 14 hours, the dollar would have, I mean, the kwacha would have appreciated. But I will tell you that if we were to continue buying the gold, we can assure you to say at 10 hours, the moment we announce to say this is how much gold we have in reserve, after 6 months of procurement, by 14 hours, the Kwacha will have appreciated. And this is a realistic position. But alas, we've got our colleagues who I think they are not very patriotic. Our colleagues in government today lack that sense of patriotism because they stopped that because they are politicking over it. As long as it's something that was done by Edgar Lungu, they don't care whether it is one that is for the benefit of this country. They just want to do away with it. And that is why, for me, I feel right now we've got a recently achieved deal that this government is priding itself on, the Mopani deal, which, for me, I've spoken to these facts to say that deal is one which is very unconstitutional. Unconstitutional to the effect that from the onset of this deal, when you look at it from the corporate law point of view, it may be seen that all procedures were followed, as in between Mopani and IRH. However, in the background, we should realize that there is a shareholder for Mopani, and that shareholder stood as a sole shareholder for Mopani, and that shareholder is ZCCM-IH. In fact, Mopani is a subsidiary of ZCCM-IH. Now, when you look at the shareholding for ZCCM-IH, you will be able to see that the major shareholder in ZCCM-IH is the IDC. IDC, which owns about 60.2% shareholding, somewhere around there, in ZCCM-IH. And then you have the GRZ, or Government of the Republic of Zambia, which is the Minister of Finance, owning about 17-point-something shares in this company. Further to this, there is NAPSA. NAPSA owning about 15% shareholding. And the balance, which is 7-point-something%, is owned by individuals, you and myself, who've decided to invest in that company. So that in itself will show you to say ZCCM-IH is a state asset. And the equity that is in ZCCM-IH, that is state equity. Further to this, Mopani, having been a subsidiary of ZCCM-IH, should tell you to say Mopani is a state property. It is a state asset. And therefore, we've been provided for, in this Constitution of the Republic of Zambia, which is Act number 2 of 2016, it provides that a state asset, in fact, let me just read the provision of the Constitution so that we don't have any doubts in the minds of Zambians, as well as those leading this country. I think, so Article 210. Article 210, when you look at clause 2 of this article, says a major state asset shall be sold, transferred, or otherwise disposed of as prescribed, subject to the approval of the National Assembly, signified by a vote of at least 2/3 of the members of Parliament. Now, it is extremely laughable that a minister of mines, having held that portfolio on behalf of the Zambian people, should stand in Parliament and lie to the Zambian people that, no, there was no sale. Or perhaps we just moved shares. But now the question is, what does the Constitution say? And the minister even decided to point at this provision to say, there is no sale. I have not even signed the transfer of any mine. Now, you see, for me, I'll actually call it arrogance of incumbency. Now, this is what the Constitution says. A major state asset shall not be sold, transferred, or otherwise disposed of without going to the National Assembly for approval by 2/3 majority. And the goodness, for avoidance of doubt, this particular constitution in this provision has further defined what a major state asset is. It goes on to say, for the purpose of this article, major state asset includes a parastatal, For example, we've got NAPSA, IDC, those are parastatals that in fact own Mopani or ZCCM-IH, or equity held by government. Now, what is equity held by government? A share that is held by a government entity or a parastatal is equity held by government. You are not going to decide to allot 51% shareholding from ZCCM-IH to whichever party. It doesn't matter, it may be IRH or the three genuine companies that in fact bidded for those shares without approval from the National Assembly. When you do that, then you are abrogating the Constitution of the Republic. Now, when you look at the CES report, and these are public documents, when you look at the CES report, the CES announcement, which provides...
You are speaking to a broad audience. What is CES?
Yeah, so ideally, this is an announcement. Normally, when you're dealing with public resources and the public companies, you see that Stockbrokers Zambia Limited will make a pronouncement. You know, they will make a pronouncement, an announcement with regards to transactions relating
at the stock exchange.
Yes, stock exchange and all those things. So in this case, we're looking at a report which was issued on the 22nd of December 2023. This report relates to the transaction announcement regarding Mopani mines. Now, this report is a public document. It provides for the nitty-gritties of the entire agreement that was there between IRH and Mopani. Now, when you look at the condition precedents, and by the way, I want people to understand what the word condition precedent is. When you are entering into a contract, there are those conditions that parties will agree to say, unless these conditions are met, the transaction shall not take off. Now, the condition precedents with regards to the Mopani deal, amongst them, which is in fact the first condition precedent, is that approval of the transaction by the shareholders of ZCCM-IH at a general meeting. Then it goes on in inverted commas, it says ZCCM-IH shareholder approval. Now, if you are going to approve a transaction that is going to give equity or to transfer equity, I'm going to use the word transfer because this government is trying to run away from the fact that that 51% has been sold. But now they are saying, no, we've just transferred. No, okay, fine, we'll use the word transfer. If we are going to transfer 51% shareholding to any entity, the Constitution under 210(2) has said a transfer of equity of a state asset should go through the National Assembly. It simply means that when these shareholders sat down to give the shareholder approval for this deal to go through, they did not consult the Zambian people. Or in fact, should I say they did not go to Parliament? Because we've not seen any sitting in Parliament where they have approved this. Because ZCCM-IH, being the shareholder approval that is required, is a government entity. It's a state asset. If a state asset is going to decide to allot any amount of share to any person, that is whether a transfer or a sale, there is need for the National Assembly to approve.
According to the Constitution.
According to the Constitution of the Republic. And therefore, for me, I think this shareholder approval that may be seated on those documents is an illegal one and an unconstitutional one. And therefore, the parties that were negotiating this transaction ought to have questioned these things. But now, you know, what normally happens in transactions, related to, from the corporate law point of view, what normally happens is, if I'm going to be engaged as a party that is going to transact with government of the Republic of Zambia, there are basically three things that we are going to do as we conduct what we call legal due diligence. Now, normally you go and approach the Attorney General to request for a legal opinion on the transaction, whether the transaction is legally correct for government to enter into. Now, if the Attorney General is going to write you an opinion, you can rely on that opinion and go ahead to deal with the government and transact. Furthermore, the other document that we normally look for is what we call a cabinet memorandum. Now, a cabinet memorandum becomes a very difficult document to access because mostly information that circulates within cabinet happens to be protected by cabinet collective responsibility and thereby becomes confidential. So normally cabinet would not release a cabinet memorandum. So what we normally do is we rely on the Attorney General's legal opinion. But in this case, it is clear that this cabinet, which is headed by the head of state, which is President Hakainde Hichilema, and also the board chairperson for IDC, which is the major shareholder for ZCCM-IH, may have made a decision to even release that document. I am not saying they released it, but they may have made that decision. And I think that's the reason why our colleagues on the other end were very comfortable with proceeding with the deal. Because I don't believe any reasonable lawyer, transactional lawyer, who is not given a go-ahead which is legally upright would proceed with this deal.
For me, Celestine, before you go any further, my concerns is the inconsistency from the Minister of Mines. You remember that in May 2023, he announced that that shortlisted 10 companies which will buy Mopani. In July, he said the list had whittled down to four companies. This was China's Zijin Mining, Norinco Group of China, and South Africa's Sibanye Stillwater. These were the top four that were shortlisted to buy Mopani. And another update was given in October that government had now, was very advanced in completing this deal, and they were targeting end of year, that among the four shortlisted companies, one will be a partner to Mopani as an equity partner. We were shocked to see the announcement of a company that didn't participate in this process to be the one that has won a tender or that has won the opportunity to be a shareholder in Mopani, an equity partner. I think that's concern number one. Concern number two is that this mining company is not known to be a mining company, and they are saying, purporting it to be a subsidiary of a bigger company in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Again, the link, you can't see it. The company itself is not known. It's never done any mining before that we are aware of. It has formed a subsidiary called Delta, which now owns these shares of 51%. The third worry is the structure of the transaction. They are saying it's $1.1 billion, and that about 400 will go to Glencore, because since 2021 the bill used to be $1.5 billion, but it has come down to something like $600 million because Mopani had been paying, and there was some write-off. Government had also advanced Mopani, I think, $150 million towards the payment of that. But come down to it is that in this transaction, about $490 million will go to Glencore, so that now it's a matter between the CMIH and this international international resource group that has bought the mine. Fourthly, there is no physical payment for shareholding. What has been pledged is an equity commitment that will pay up to this $620 million. $620 million, but it has to be invested in the mines. They are telling you who's selling that this is not your money. This is our investment pledge towards the mine, and it should be directed towards this.
Yeah.
But Mopani is not your ordinary mine. It has huge assets. It has a smelter, it has a refinery, it has brand new shafts that were sunk. It's a very, very expensive and lucrative mine. And the deal for me doesn't cut it. Just speak to these matters that you've been interrogating.
Yeah, so ideally, like I indicated, from the corporate law point of view, those items that are on the condition precedents, if they were met, then it means it's a straightforward transaction. However, for me, I believe, as long as there was no Parliament or National Assembly approval, the shareholder approval stands to be illegal and unconstitutional. And therefore, that was not met as a condition precedent. Further to this, you know, as long as this minister stood in Parliament or National Assembly indicating to say, I have not signed any approval, but on the condition precedents, I think it should be condition precedent number 4. It has said that receipt of approval and or consent of the transaction pursuant to Section 67 of the Mines and Minerals Development Act 2015, Act number 11 of 2015, from the Minister of Mines and Minerals Development. So in short, this condition, if it has not been met, because this minister has said he did not sign anything, if it has not been met, then it means there is no transaction whatsoever. There's no deal. It means everything is a nullity. So these two condition precedents have to be met. And the Mines and Minerals Development Act under Section 67 is extremely clear that the minister has to consent. Unless this minister is telling us that he's just been signing documents without reading them, which is a clear show of incompetence on the part of the minister. The quality that Bali has given us in this country. But the minister was on the floor of the National Assembly lying to the Zambian people. I think for me, speaking to the legalities of this transaction, which I feel that is unconstitutional and it is a nullity, ab initio. So I think, and because of the arrogance, I even indicated to say, because of the arrogance of incumbency that the minister is showing, we shall soon be taking these matters before the Constitutional Court for interpretation. And just to see that there was need for a shareholder approval to pass through the National Assembly, because the Constitution says so. Now, looking at the entire deal now.
Don't they have the Attorney General? Is the Attorney General not aware of Article 210 and Sub-Article 2? It
is unfortunate for me. I would say the leader of the bar, who is the Attorney General, has been on several occasions not been. There are two things. It's either he's been advising government and government has just been deciding not to follow the advice of the Attorney General through the arrogance of the executive, or the Attorney General has not been informing government of these loopholes. For example, you saw an issue where this government, in fact, this Attorney General decided to enter into consent judgment to compensate individuals that are seated on Nole. And unfortunately, how then do you compensate someone who's seated on a Nole? That is unheard of. There is no legal justification for you to compensate a person that is seated on a Nole. And that consent was signed by the Attorney General, or is it the Solicitor General? And that is unheard of. So those are issues that leave us with a lot of doubts on whether there is enough that is being done by this Attorney General. However, looking at this deal, the Mopani deal, and what has been stated in this document, you'll be able to see that there is equity. There is an equity pledge of $620 million or in exchange of 51% shareholding in the mine. So for me, I'll actually say, truly and seriously speaking, if we are patriotic as Zambia, we would not allow this transaction to go through, because it simply means that we are selling this mine for a song. Why do I say so? The realistic figures behind the assets of Mopani themselves are beyond $3 billion. The assets that Mopani has are beyond $3 billion.
Yeah.
How then did they evaluate the shareholding and the price of the share to come up to something like $1.21 billion? It doesn't make sense, because if you are going to sell 51% shareholding of an asset like Mopani at $620 million, then it means the evaluation of the 100% shareholding is $1.2 billion, somewhere there. But it doesn't add up. The maths does not add up, because, I mean, basic bookkeeping, which I am aware that the president is aware of because he is an economist. Basic bookkeeping indicates that assets plus liability is equal to capital. Now, if we are being told that the liability that Mopani had is $1.5 billion owing to Glencore, how then did they reach up to $620 million to sell 51% stake in Mopani, or to transfer 51% stake in Mopani? It doesn't add up. For me, I think there is a lot of corruption that smells on this deal. A lot of
there
corruption.
is. In fact, I want to bring you another aspect of very serious concern. Two transactions have followed one another, and our people may not have followed them closely to see the relationship. There's a company that salvages slugs like black mountains, these mining dumps, and reprocesses the minerals that are there. So there's a famous company called Jubilee Metals Group. And Jubilee Metals Group recently signed this agreement with Mopani to process the black mountain that is in Mufulira. Now, these black mountains, as done by earlier studies, for example, the Kitwe Black Mountain, which people are aware of, was estimated to be worth over $5 billion at the time. So the black mountains do not really, they do not have value. They have immense value. So Jubilee Metals has now signed an agreement, a South African company, has signed an agreement with Mopani that they'll process Mufulira slag. And Jubilee CEO also makes an announcement. Is Leon Koza, who's the CEO of Jubilee Metals of South Africa, says they've reconstituted the board, and on the board they've brought in a gentleman who's very well known in this country as a business partner of the president, Muna Hantuba. Muna Hantuba has now come to the board of Jubilee Metals, which has entered into an agreement with Mopani Copper Mines. It is those issues and lack of transparency that is raising concerns. Maybe when people are accusing the president that he has sold the mines to himself, it's issues like this. First, IRH, International Resource Holding, IRH, the board structure is murky. They are saying it is owned by International Holding Company, which is like a sovereign fund in United Arab Emirates. We haven't seen documents demonstrating that. And then you have a company now being associated with a business partner to the president, getting this lucrative contract to process the slag from Mufulira, which belongs to Mopani. In fact, if you process the slag, you don't even need any investment anywhere to come from anywhere. You can just process the slag and even fund Mopani. This deal required to have gone through Parliament, that our parliamentarians could ask all these questions.
So, like I indicated, for me, I think I'm even looking at it's an issue of integrity. I think our leaders today are lacking integrity, and we should speak to these things. There are two things, integrity and patriotism. You cannot decide that this company pledges $1.1 billion in investment. Then you decide to say, okay, fine, we are going to give you equity of 51% shareholding at $620 million. But this document is indicating to say $220 million will be paid at the signing of this contract. However, so that is only $220 million as capital contribution. However, they equally indicate to say this company called IRH or Delta will lend you $400 million, which they shall pay directly to Glencore as a way of restructuring the debt owing to Glencore of $1.5 billion. So there it doesn't add up. Why should they lend us the money? What are you trying to do? And that $400 million forms part of the $1.1 billion. That is a joke. And on top of that, they say this company will also have up to $80 million of shareholder loan that will be given to the company again. Now, if you are going to release $220 million to recapitalize, so as to ensure that the mine is liquid, that simply means that we don't need IRH. Why do I say we don't need IRH? Because just recently, 1 week ago, we had NAPSA injecting $300 million into the rehabilitation, or is it the upgrading of Lusaka-1st Road into dual carriageway. $300 million from NAPSA. That is the Zambian people's money. And are we saying that NAPSA does not have a further $300 million to pump into Mopani? So that is why I'm saying for us, I think we've been duped. This has been the worst transaction in the history of this country. And it's even worse than it was when we were dealing with Anil Agao, who went out there to the world and telling the world to say, I bought KCM at $25 million and I did not even pay the cash. I just placed, within 2 years, I had made over $1 billion and became a billionaire. I bought this mine at a song. This is a repeat of that, and it's like we are not learning from that. We are not patriotic. 90%, in fact, 98% of the management of all these mines that we see in Zambia are actually run by Zambians. The remaining 2% are those that are the expatriates and the ones that are running as shareholders at that level, the directors. Those are expatriates. But in Zambia, remember, we've got an immigration policy. Ambassador, you should be able to speak to these. We've got an immigration policy that speaks to expatriates, that expatriates are supposed to teach the locals. Imagine, 55 or 60 years after independence, we've got enough degree holders in this country. Enough people are running these mines, but we still want to rely on this colonial mentality of saying a foreigner should come and run our mines. I think our leaders right now, today, they lack integrity. Our leaders lack patriotism.
For me, I've expressed concern that we had the greatest opportunity because by 2021, we owned both KCM and Mopani. And with the outlook for copper and cobalt in the world, that they are driving this energy transition, and copper and cobalt, manganese, lithium will be very, very crucial to this transition that is taking place for electric vehicles. The price of copper is speculated. It will only keep on rising because it's a limited resource. So why would you squander the opportunity to own the mines? People have been saying government doesn't have money or ZCMIH doesn't have money. Neither do these investors have money.
They don't.
They will go to the market and borrow from the market. ZCMIH, which is listed in London and in Paris, can be given an opportunity to raise funds to run Mopani and KCM. But you have a leadership that believes that only foreigners can run our mines, only foreign investment can rescue us. They do not think that we have capacity. And I've heard some politicians say we can't even run the mines. We ran the mines on our own for decades. ZCCM, as a conglomerate, was run by Zambians from top to down. No expatriates. There could have been expatriates here and there, but essentially run by Zambians. And the Zambians that ran those mines are now scattered across the world. They are in Australia, they are in Russia, they are in America, they are in Peru, they are in Chile running those mines. But our own leaders don't believe that we can run these mines. Celestine, let's quickly transition. I think you've discussed the issue of Mopani and KCM, and the general state of our country, I think, is what we should discuss. Where are we with the state of our country? President Hakainde Hichilema came on the euphoria, especially by young people, when he was elected in 2021, that he will change the dynamics of our economy, that he will put the economy on a recovery plan, that he will restore the rule of law, that he will entrench human rights and democracy. We seem to have achieved the opposite. Speak to these issues.
Yeah, so for me, in terms of the democratic state of our country, I will tell you that we've really backslidden. Why do I say so? You see, the democracy that we expected to be enjoying is not as is supposed to be. One, there's been rampant arrests of opposition leaders. You yourself, Ambassador, have been arrested on several occasions on trumped-up charges. Up to now, the state has failed to proceed with your matters. And this is something that we've been seeing day in, day out. Why? Because it is clear that government intends to intimidate opposition leaders, or in fact, any voice of reason that will come out to speak to the truth surrounding the leadership of this country. If we are going to go on and talk to these matters, they will come and intimidate you. Either the police will call you for questioning, interrogations, and all these issues. So for me, I would say, right now, there's a serious shrinking of our democratic space. Imagine up to now, as we're talking, we've got an individual who's been accused of an offense in Eastern Province, who's a Patriotic Front member, Rizwan Patel, up to now still languishing in those cells. This person is not being brought before court. Unfortunately, he's not even. So it is unfortunate that these are things we are seeing, because Rizwan was a voice that would speak for the people of the Eastern Province. So the same way that we've got another journalist, is it a blogger from Chawama, who up to date is still in the cells. He's not being charged. And yet, that was done at the instruction of a UPND cadre, who said, no, pick him up because he's alleging that I do not have a legal qualification to be called a lawyer. But you see, if people are factual, why should you then be agitated? So in terms of the democratic space, I feel the rule of law is not properly adhered to. There are principles of governance, for example, such as constitutionalism, rule of law, and just looking at things such as constitutionalism, procedures. Leaders in this country should be following the Constitution. We cannot see a scenario where we are seeing a blatant abrogation of constitutional provisions by this government. Why do we say so? The Mopani deal is one of them. Further to this, we've got National Assembly, which is right now behaving in a manner clearly showing to say there's an executive arm influencing the decisions of the National Assembly. Imagine, just recently, the MP for Mambilima made a statement in the House to tell the president, to say, Mr. President, you are a liar. The president goes to the MP, the MP tells the president, say, Mr. President, Milimu, you told us it's going to be this price. You have failed to do it. You lied to us. The price of fuel, you told that it was going to be this. You lied to us. Now it has skyrocketed. The arrests have been done against the opposition. You lied to us that you will not behave the same way that PF may have been behaving. Mr. President, you lied to us. And before you know it, a minister, a full cabinet minister in the name of Gary Nkombo, makes a statement to say, Honorable Chisenga will not go unpunished. Before you know it, against parliamentary procedures, we have seen that this member of parliament has been suspended from the House without being subjected to the Parliamentary Privileges Committee. But what rule of law is there? It is clear that the executive just made a statement to say, this woman will not go unpunished. And immediately they are cracking the whip. Why should the speaker be subjected to such low levels of adhering to illegal instructions? I think for me, I believe there we are losing it. The principle of good governance, such as separation of power, is not seen right now. It is neither here nor there. We have seen matters. Imagine a matter to do with an injunction. An injunction is taking more than 3 months. How then do you protect your interest from being irreparable? Because an injunction is an emergent application. This is an application where there is even a certificate of urgency. Clearly, we are seeing that judges are being intimidated in this country. Very unfortunate. Judges are being threatened day in, day out, and intimidated. We had the Patriotic Front filing an injunction against Mao Sampa and his cohorts over the illegal AGM they held. Or is it EGM that they held, convention? Up to now, we are being told that the matters are being adjourned year, day in, day out. How? It does not make legal sense. There's no equity there. An injunction requires that because you know to say this, the resultant cause of keeping the status quo as is will produce irreparable damage. It has to be urgent. These are matters that are not being heard. Clearly, it's a clear show to say this government is vindictive. It's a clear show to say there is an intention to ensure that the judiciary as well as the legislature falls and is only controlled by the executive arm. So there is no governance there. It is a break in democracy. I think the rule of law that the president has been preaching on is not something that we are seeing. Today, the president will say, no, I say you need to investigate before you arrest. But what we are seeing is the opposite. Why should it be that a person is arrested and charged with, not even charged, arrested, kept in the cells for 5 days before they can be given a charge of hate speech? I think, why should it be that there should be selective justice? An offense committed by a UPND member is not being considered an offense unless committed by an opposition member. We saw the Honorable Minister of Education making a statement to say members are primitive. Is it primitive or something? But that is the Minister of Education. That is hate speech when you look at it. That is hate speech. Why is it that up to now, that minister has never been called to the police for questioning? That is selective justice. And as lawyers, we're looking at these things, and I'm only hopeful that very soon we'll have lawyers coming to speak to these issues. Because we're looking at these things and seeing our profession deteriorating, because there is no way. On one end, this government speaks to issues to do with rule of law. On the other end, it is selective justice. We had Mao Sampa committing an offense in broad daylight at the party secretariat for the Patriotic Front. Up to now, we've never even heard the police calling him for questioning. How then do we say we are even as democratic as this government would want to brag? It's very unfortunate. We had offenses committed, for example, where we had a mayor in Kafue stating a very tribal remark. But that statement in itself does not become hate speech unless it is mentioned or spoken out by Munir Zulu. And you even arrest Munir Zulu. You see, so therein lies a huge problem. There is, for lack of a better term, I think there is hypocrisy in the application of the law. And I will urge my colleagues at the police as well as in the civil service to remember that a term of government, of any government in Zambia, as the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia stands today, is only 5 years. Allow not to be abused by the politicians that are holding these offices. A civil servant is one that works with the government of the day, not following illegal instructions. Because colleagues, the abuse that you are undergoing today and the abuse of the law that you are doing today will follow you in the next 5 years. God forbid this government will be voted back into power in 2026. Because of the way things are moving on the ground, I will tell you that the abuse that we are seeing as lawyers, for example, of state institutions is so much that I don't think any reasonable lawyer would want to cast a vote on the UPND, because they speak opposite to what they pleased. They abuse. A civil servant today is being abused. The police is being abused. So I'll always remind my colleagues to say, remember, the office of president or the incumbency of a president only lasts for 5 years. There will be yet another election where we shall go and cast a vote. We will go and cast a vote. Now, what are you going to do when this president leaves power in 2026, after we vote him out? You are a civil servant. Remain neutral. Remain a civil servant. Imagine today we've got an ambassador. In fact, the ambassador, you should be advising these junior ambassadors to you. We've got an ambassador who's making political statements, commenting on political issues, coming out as a UPND political cadre in the name of Dr. Munsha. Elias Munsha. We've been advising him to say, you are a civil servant. Stay away from political statements. If you have to speak to these issues, speak on behalf of the country that you represent as a plenipotentiary of this president. Don't speak with a political face. No,
on diplomacy, you have a lot of work. You know, first as economic diplomacy, ambassadors are supposed to organize business meetings, business forums, investors to come to our country. You have to organize the local Zambians that you have in the diaspora in your country. There is a lot of work for the ambassador to do that. He shouldn't even meddle in politics back home. And I hope that my dear brother Elias Munsha is listening, and he should accept that he's no longer Bakwetu TV. He's now Zambia's ambassador, Zambia's high commissioner to Australia. And we want to hear him. How many investors has he brought? We don't want him coming alone to Zambia. We want him to come with an entourage of people that are interested in investing in our country. This similarly goes to, for example, Permanent Secretary at Ministry of Information, who regularly engages in political tiffs with politicians. He's a civil servant. He should leave that job and that matter to the minister. He has a Minister of Information who's a politician, who should handle the politicians. Not politicians, you know, he is castigating politicians. He's a permanent secretary, he's a civil servant. So I agree with you there. As we come to wind up, what is your message to the opposition? Because Zambians have recognized that clearly President Hakainde Hichilema is limping. They don't see him recover by 2026. He could be facing, he could be a one-term president. And the likelihood, looking at the status quo, I think may remain the same. But who will Zambians vote for? What is the alternative? You do not want President Hichilema, who has failed the people of Zambia, who has failed the economy, who has entrenched dictatorship and authoritarian, to return to power on account that the opposition is disorganized, the opposition can't organize themselves. What is your advice?
I think on that aspect, I will advise the opposition to remain united and just remember that what they are fighting for example, for me, I would say what they are fighting for is the restoration of the rule of law. What they are fighting for is the idea of bringing back the sanctity and the respect given to the house such as the National Assembly. We need to restore the integrity of the National Assembly. We need to restore the integrity of the judiciary. What they are fighting for is that one man in Matero who knows to say there's not been millimil which is affordable. Is one man in Vubwi who knows to say transport has been increased because this government has decided to increase the cost of living. So what they are fighting for is not the selfish interests of one individual deciding to sell state resources to foreigners, when in fact we've got the capability to run our own resources. So what they are fighting for is not is a country that will be good for all of our children and for generations to come. I don't think we should, as an opposition or as the opposition, continue to run in a way of splitting votes. I think they should speak with one voice. What is more important now is to have a voice of reason, one that will be able to say, it does not matter who is at the helm. Eventually, for me, I pray that eventually we shall be able to amend the Constitution to ensure that we introduce proportional representation and introduce a rule that recalls leaders who are going to be erring leaders. Because by now, if we had passed Bill 10, Ambassador Mwamba, if we had passed Bill 10, I will tell you that if we had the principle of recalling leaders, by now, this leader that we have today would have been recalled, because we've seen a lot of fails more than successes. You cannot celebrate, for example, a restructuring of a debt by elongating the time frame for repayment, which then is going to hinder my children and our grandchildren, because it means we will be paying this debt for a very long period of time, and yet we may not even need an IMF bailout. Because the truth of the matter is, today, with the amount of gold we have, imagine we can be able to pay off or even raise that 1.4 billion within 6 months of mining. With the amount of Sugilite we have, imagine there was a truckload of Sugilite carrying Sugilite worth about $750 million that has since disappeared in thin air at a police station in this government, barely 4, 5, 6 months ago. Imagine the amount of Sugilite, $750 million, and yet we are still begging for $1.4 billion from the IMF. That is a joke. That is a joke. So I think the level of patriotism that we can have in this country should be one that is going to require that all of us should remember to unite and ensure that we do not have a government that does not want to listen to advice continue. A government that will come out and insult the church for having to advise them. I think Zambia remains a Christian nation, and I don't think we are children of a lesser God. We believe in that God that is there. So I think on that basis, we should be able to ensure that we unite and fight for real democracy.
Thank you very much. Celestine, thank you very much for gracing the Conversation podcast, and thank you for finding time to come and be with us to share your views. What are your last words before we close?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me here. And I think my last words would be that, you see, we should be able to remember our forefathers, the true Pan-Africanists, the likes of Thomas Sankara, the likes of Julius Pangaragi Nyerere, the likes of Kenneth Kaunda, the likes of Muammar Gaddafi, who stood in and fought for the rights of their people in their land. And I think in Zambia, we are a constitutional democracy, and by virtue whereof, those of us that are sworn in to protect and defend the Constitution should be able to come out and do so without any fear. Because the ultimate objective or the ultimate end of any of us, as long as you are a mortal being, is death. You should not fear death because an individual has threatened it to you. But what we should remember is that we are doing this for our children, and the generations to come. We should leave a country that will be able to be remembered to say we had individuals that fought for our democracy. So our bodies or flesh may be arrested or killed, but I don't think our spirits will die, because we talk for the right thing. And I think Zambians should remember to just protect and defend the Constitution.
Wonderful, wonderful. Dear viewers, we've come to the end of our today's conversation podcast. We're hosting a lawyer, renowned lawyer and governance activist, Celestine Mukandila. Until we have another special guest, God bless you, God bless our country, and shalom, shalom.